Drop a stone in a bucket, and the ripples radiate out. In a big enough bucket, this expansion of energy seems endless, until those ripples hit the edge of the bucket. Then, in an instant, all that energy is moving in the exact opposite direction. We have hit the edge. The planet is finite. What was once frugal is now wasteful. What was once business as usual must become business as unusual. My name is Alex Bogusky, and I've spent most of my life building brands. I got good enough at it that the biggest corporations in the world asked me to shape their brands. Honestly, I loved it. But a couple of years ago, I started to notice that the rules of business were suddenly changing, almost running in reverse. So I left my agency to get down to the business of imagining a future. I partnered with a friend, Rob Shuham, and my wife, Anna, and we started the Fearless Cottage to explore the potential for a new agreement between consumers and corporations, an agreement that more fully empowered the largest and most powerful economic force in the world, the consumer. We must have struck a chord because thousands of people came forward asking how they could get involved, but we were stuck talking about the problem. Modern brands are worth billions of dollars, representing up to half of the company's total value. But even the most progressive companies can't share that value. The benefit of brand value only accrues to the company itself, not to society, not to the environment, and not to generations of the future. Why? What would happen if a brand could be shared just like any other asset? So we had to ask ourselves, what would you do if you could do anything? The answer to that question created Common. Common will unlock that value. Common is 1 part community, 1 part business incubator, and 1 part collaborative brand. Common is designed to bring people together, unleashing their creativity to rapidly prototype and launch hundreds of mutually supportive businesses, and doing all this under a shared brand. A brand that's community-owned and community-directed, offering huge brand value to the small social entrepreneur. Someday soon, a startup social venture in some far-off corner of the world will be able to launch their business with the immediate global awareness of a brand that represents a shared purpose, shared goals, shared means, and shared values. A single brand encompassing products, businesses, and the ideals of its community. Common may be the first collaborative mark, but in the spirit of collaboration, we hope it's just the first of many.
Well, hi, everybody. That was the end, and now I'm going to go back and start a little bit in the beginning. And I'm going to talk about that edge of the bucket. You saw Alex describing this effect where when you drop a stone in, the water radiates out, and then when it hits the edge, it comes back and creates a more chaotic environment. So I live a sort of bipolar life. I live on the coast of Maine. It was an attempt to get out of the rat race with my family and my kids. And then my working life is on the coast of California at a famous surf spot called Mavericks. Beautiful spot. This is our building inside. And a lot of what we do is brand strategy and design work, taking organizations and moving them to the next level creatively. And we work with companies like HP and Symantec and Sun and Starbucks, and you know, it should be good, but I describe it almost like you're trying on a shirt or a jacket at a store and everybody says, that jacket looks really good on you, and you're like, yeah, really? I don't know, really? And that's kind of how this felt to me, even though I was doing well at it, making money, winning awards, we had clients, you know, we had employees, and it was all going well. And there was just something about it that wasn't quite right. And I have 2 kids, and this is my son Zane. And I just started feeling like we were at these kind of global tipping points, whether you're talking about climate change or peak oil or deforestation, species extinction, population explosion, China and India. And it just seemed to me like something was out of whack, and that the impact of humans on the natural world was at this kind of pivotal point, this tipping point. And started thinking about how I can use my talents as a designer, as a communicator, as a creative instigator, and apply them to things that I felt really mattered. So in 2003, I had met this amazing guy, Samuel Mockbee, who started the Rural Studio for Architecture in Alabama. And he inspired me to start a program I called Project M, the M standing for Mockbee in Maine, where I was working, and this idea of mentoring young people. And I would get originally they were all graphic designers, now they're industrial designers, architects, writers, filmmakers, young creative people. In that period between getting out of school and getting real jobs. And the idea was to infect them with this kind of retrovirus like herpes, where you would prove to them that what they knew how to do could have a profound impact on shaping the future. And I felt like if I took them through a very intense process over a month period, that they would be infected with this idea, and then later it would inform the arc of their careers. We normally go to places like rural Alabama, where this is. We've been to Detroit, rainforests in Costa Rica, East Baltimore, places that are very unusual for the participants. I think that for them to be a really intense experience, they need to be out of their comfort zone. And it kind of opens up their synaptic connections to new experiences. Once they're in that area, the project comes out of their experience. So this is rural Alabama, and this group found out that 1,000 out of 4,000 households didn't have access to fresh water. They either were on shallow wells contaminated with their own sewage because there were no septic systems, or they went to the gas station with these jugs and filled them up. So we did this project. Really, it was a campaign to raise money to buy these water meters and get them hooked up. We found a local newsprint printer who did these giant tabloid. They just print like local community newspapers, really cheap. I think we got 5,000 for like $900. This is the cover. Oprah has one, so does Paris Hilton. Charles Manson uses one every day. You have one too. Herbert Banks doesn't. Neither do Jackie and Damian Green. Hale County, Alabama, water's not a right. It's actually not a right anywhere in the country. And we raised about $55,000 or so, hooked up over 100 families to fresh water. That was 2007. And what's happened since then, as we've run these Project M's, they've gone from campaigns like that one, which was very successful on most levels, to what I describe as social enterprises and ventures, things that are profitable and sustainable and actually have an ongoing effect in these communities. One of the most successful is this project called Pi Lab, where a bunch of the Project M people got together and they went around the group and said, what hidden talent, does nobody know about? And one girl was really into baking pies, and her whole family, they could bake pies, they loved pie. And so they did this event in Maine called Free Pie, and it was shortly after the financial collapse. And it's just like a altruistic thing to gather people together around pie and coffee. And I was thinking, I don't know, is this really going to be an interesting project? What kind of impact it has? But what happened was that group, because it was so successful as a one-day event, they went down to Alabama, this is the same town, Greensboro, and opened up what they called Pi Lab. Built it for, I think it was around $1,000 worth of materials. The wood is all reclaimed. Usually these projects are on like just fumes in terms of budgets. And what's happened with this Pi Lab, it's an ongoing pie and coffee shop, but it's also become a center where the community gathers. It's a very segregated area where there's African-American churches and restaurants and white churches, restaurants. So this is a neutral space where the whole community can gather. Another project we did there that ended up into an enterprise is around getting young people in urban areas on bikes. And you guys in New York probably are aware of this whole fixie movement, these single speed bikes. And we were like, well, maybe this is like surfing or snowboarding. and it's going to be the birth of something bigger. And so we said, well, let's ride the wave of interest in this fixie movement and just get young people on bikes. Invented this program called NADA. So what NADA is NADA's about nothing, right? And it's less cars, less gas, less is more independence, health, freedom, DIY fun. You pay $100 to join the NADA movement, and your membership card is a bike frame. So you get this raw steel bike frame, looks like that, and then you tweak it out. This is one actually in New York, in Brooklyn. So the whole thing was that it's not just buying a bike, it's joining a movement and getting this frame, and then there's the whole DIY thing where there's no logo, it's no brand, you make it your own. So it was kind of interesting for me how I started with this idea of infecting young people with this idea and doing campaigns, and then they became actual ventures and businesses over the last 8 years or so. So in 2010, I had a mutual friend, a guy named Rob Walker, who's a writer, said, you've got to meet this guy, Alex Bogusky. And I don't know if you know who he is. He's this sort of maverick advertising genius, creative director of the decade, kind of notorious. He was involved in the Truth campaign against big tobacco and the Mini campaign and Burger King, and had just quit the agency in 2010. He said, I've got to do something else. So we got together, and I describe it as this kind of harmonic convergence where we were both resonating sort of at the same frequency, but separately, him in advertising and me in design. And so in the course of about 3 months, we've come up with this whole new idea. This is the other partner, Rob Shuham, on the right there. And so this idea is really based on this concept where you can tell who's in power by the height of the buildings, right? So you have the castle, the cathedral, the Capitol building, and now corporations are the highest buildings, of course, and how the previous one in power then works for the one in power. So the idea is that corporations, business, is the most powerful force on earth right now. Also, the value of those. So Walmart, $408 billion revenue, bigger than Norway. Royal Dutch Shell, bigger than United Arab Emirates, bigger than Costa Rica, bigger than Ghana. So the value of these corporations is enormous. You saw this in the video, the value of the brand. Something that Alex and I know a lot about. So Coca-Cola, almost half the value is just brand value alone and not hard assets. So the idea is to build an open source network for a new brand of capitalism. So using capitalism, using for-profit ventures, all aligned under a common set of ethics and guidelines. And so kind of using the force of business and capitalism to drive positive change. Tom's Shoes, you might know about, is an example of this kind of social entrepreneur where you buy a pair of shoes and another pair is sent to somebody who needs them. So that the concept is to move from disposability to sustainability, secrecy to transparency, competition to collaboration, and the individual to community. And going from this idea of owning and protecting the trademark to something we're calling a collaborative mark. So this is really an open brand, the world's first collaborative brand. So here's how you can think about it. So if you think about TED, right? And TED is sharing their brand. This is one of the only examples I can think of an entity really sharing their brand. The way they have. They're very prescriptive about how that gets shared, you know, the guidelines around the TEDx events. And then you have Virgin, which isn't sharing its brand, of course, but it has, I think, 80 different business units, right? So this idea that you can have an airline, a bridal service, galactic flight, all within one Virgin brand, right? So we've sort of combined these two ideas. One, that the brand common will be shared by everybody who is in the community, and that it can be all across all these different kinds of enterprises. And then this idea that we're going to give the support and tools to young creatives, that to combat the forces of status quo and business as usual, we're going to use young people like I do in our Project M sessions, that these younger people in the early parts of their careers can start these social ventures. Another concept I've been using at Project M a lot is something called thinking wrong, based on this idea that within our brains we have these synaptic connections. I sometimes think of them as heuristic biases that allow us to exist in the world and make decisions. So a great example of that is shark attack off the coast of California at Mavericks. People in New Jersey stay out of the water, right? So the synaptic connection is A, shark attack, bad, B, stay out of the water, right? So behavior has been altered, but there's no statistical correlation, of course, right? So our brains just have these direct kind of pathways of thought. Thinking wrong is about disrupting those. So if you think about the current situation we're in globally, like I talked about with the tipping points, getting out of this is going to require alternative ways of thinking. So instead of A to B, it's A to shoe or steaming round thing. And we use various techniques to kind of disrupt the orthodoxies and patterns of thinking, come up with new ideas. So last night, the site went live, so you guys can all sign up to be communists. And this is just a beta site right now. And it has an aspect of communism, but it's really, we're calling it new capitalism, right? So it's really using the force of capitalism, but really sharing that to a community, has values that then can drive businesses to address that. I'll talk about some of the projects we're doing. We're kind of prototyping and pushing a few businesses through it as case studies right now, but in the future, there'll be hundreds of these being spawned at any one time. One of the projects is this $300 house project, where there's a competition to design a $300 house, and this is mostly for disaster relief and also in third world situations in slums. We're gathering a group down in Alabama for 2 weeks that's going to be rapidly prototyping this. Another thing just debuted at TED in California about a month ago called Coffee Common. So what this is all these specialty roasters in this third wave of coffee got together, and we brought in all these world-class baristas at TED, and it was going to be called TED Coffee, right? And nobody would really be talking about something called TED Coffee. Well, what happened as we got this collective together to do the coffee at TED and then branded it Coffee Common, all of a sudden it became a real entity, and now it's being prototyped and launched in a bigger way. And this is really to bring attention to the way coffee is harvested, how it's roasted and prepared, to elevate this coffee conversation by this collective of different coffee growers. New York Times did an article about Coffee Common a week after TED. So it's this idea of the power of the brand to actually make something real happen. Here's one I'm really interested in, and this comes off of the NADA project. It's called Common Cycles. And I met this guy actually from Brooklyn. His name's Marty Odlin. He'd be a great one to speak at this conference next year. And Marty started something called the Bamboo Bike Studio, making bikes out of bamboo. And he just recently told me an interesting story that he used to work for a bicycle company called K2, and they'd go over to Taiwan and they'd make these, as an engineer, he would work with them, and they'd make these amazing machines using carbon fiber technology, and they'd solve these engineering problems. Then they put the bike in a box, ship it back to the US, And all the value of how that was made was lost, and then they'd have to put the value back in the object, right? So they'd have to, through marketing, through color, through graphics, make something want to buy it. And he said, something's wrong with the way this is working, that the value of that object and how it's made is now lost in that process. So what he did was, it's called the Bamboo Bike Workshop, and they, in a weekend, you build your own bike, put the wheels and gears on it, and ride out on Sunday. Here he is down in Alabama. Alabama is uniquely suited to grow bamboo as well. And he taught us how to make these bikes. This is a building in Greensboro, right across the street from Pi Lab, that we're going to set up as a bamboo bike workshop, employing people in the community and starting this bike project. Here's one of the prototypes that we've made now. So that's just an example of a company that's being prototyped and launched right now under the Common brand. Every company can look unique and different, so it's not prescriptive in the sense that you would have to use the Virgin logo a certain way. In fact, the individual companies can't use the logo. You have to develop your own identity and look and feel, and what connects your venture to Common is just using the name Common in it. And we think of ourselves as these new industrialists, sort of thinking wrong about industry. There's the website, common.is, and anyone can sign up, so I invite you to. Thank you.